Hello. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Office Hours by the Ozymandias Project. Trireme Transit is now boarding for all new and returning passengers. Now departing, present ponderings. Next stop is Ancient Office Hours at a library lost in the sands of time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 95 of Ancient Office Hours. This week, I am super excited to bring you this fun conversation with Michael Antonakos, the voice of Alexios in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Michael is a professional actor in film, television, theater, voice work, and video games. Michael has become a well-known performance capture actor in the video game world ever since he landed his first video game audition with Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, where he fell in love with motion capture and voice performance. Some of his other projects include Sleeping Dogs, Dead Rising 4, Mass Effect Andromeda, and Anthem. He can also be seen in multiple TV series and films, including The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Warcraft, Arrow, Supernatural, The Good Doctor, and Odysseus' Voyage to the Underworld. In this episode, Michael discussed getting into acting, his fascination with the Minoans and telling lesser-known stories, his experience working on Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and shared a fun behind-the-scenes story from making Odysseus' Voyage to the Underworld. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and review us on Apple or Spotify. Awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so excited about this conversation. So I want to start you off with what I hope is going to be an easy question. And that's, when did you kind of figure out that you liked history and or mythology or both, all the things together?
I don't know if there was a when, but I just always did. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to just see the books my parents had on the shelves, especially with mythology books, and I would just pick them up and start glancing through them and reading them. I really liked that part because I like the stories as well. And then I would also get a lot out of the morality elements of the tales. I felt like they were a bit of guidance. Oddly enough, as a kid, you're like, these have meaning, and I'm understanding there's meaning here. Oh, like I got that concept early on. And then in history classes in school, I really enjoyed understanding how we get to where we are and what's led us here. That's always been an intriguing part of my life, of understanding, like, how do we get to where we are? And that's with everything. It's like, how did this get to this point? How did this get to this point? And it kind of always leads you further and further back in time. And it's never yesterday or 50 years ago or, 100 years ago. It just keeps going. And then all of a sudden you're 3,000 years back and you're like, oh, that's where it started. It's like, so it's just, it takes a long time. It could take a long time. That takes a lot of dedication to try and search for that root, is what I've learned. The root is way harder to find than you think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just love hearing how people, when they come to it and they're like, this is kind of cool. This isn't just like random.
Yeah.
But so obviously you're Greek Canadian. So did you grow up mostly in Canada? Were you in Greece? Did you switch back and forth between the two a lot?
Yeah, I was born in Greece, and I moved to Canada when I was pretty young, about 3, and then I would go back and forth throughout my childhood and teens because my parents divorced at a certain age. I was about 6, 7, and so my dad moved back to Greece, and then I would go visit in the summers, and so I'd spend a lot of time there. I'd spearfish with my dad in the summers. Kind of, that was like my happy place, was going to Greece in the summer times, and it was good. It was a good cultural connection, and it helped me see different perceptions of reality, of life, than just being like Canadian. When you get a different cultural upbringing, you see the world differently. Growing up, you're like, oh, this isn't the only way of living or the only way of seeing or the only way of interacting. There's lots of different ways depending on what culture you're in. And so that was really valuable for me. And as I've grown up, I see the value that I got out of that. So going back and forth was really, really awesome.
Nice. Well, and then with the unique privilege you had to be able to go to Greece, like coolest place on earth, right?
Right.
Like, that's kind of, whether we like it or not, the foundational culture and mythology that we sort of look to, at least Western cultures do. So, like, you know, would you say, like, did it have a big impact on you to be able to go to Greece and sort of understand where these things come from? Because for a lot of us who grew up not there, right, we can only sort of imagine. We don't know what the country looks like. We don't know anything about the culture. So, do you feel that that contributed?
It was later, probably like 20, when I went to Greece because I was in theater school, university at the time, and then I went back and I saw it in a different way because then I'd go check out the old amphitheaters and feel what, how they constructed these spaces and how they conveyed the stories for the people and how it was very much in your face. Like we have news, we have media and all the stuff of today. But at that point, it was like you're interacting with your audience and you're playing with them in a way that's also informative of the present times. You could be mocking your political people right on stage. You could be telling mythological tales and you have the choruses behind you and how they did it with mask work. And like it was a fascinating for me because I was learning all that in school and then going and seeing it and then walking into an amphitheater and dropping a coin or making a sound and hearing how that they design the spaces so that the sound travels all around and you're in this echo chamber of sound when you're in the center. And the technique of design of carving into a mountain like that and the stone and how it was done, it's just like, it's fascinating, blew me away. So it hit me a lot later how they were using those spaces, how they designed those spaces, and how they were conveying and interacting with the people of the time through story and such. It was constant from what I understood. It was constant. Those spaces were used a lot. It's like your public forum as well.
Yeah, yeah. What a cool experience, honestly. We have a lot of general Greek myths, but I'm curious whether you had any sort of either favorite local or even to within your family, like fun sort of ancient stories or Greek myths or whatever that weren't maybe in the canon, right? That we all know.
There was little things like my dad or stepfather would tell me about ideas that he had learned at the time, like underlining messages of mythologies. Like the Golden Fleece story was about going to Spain and getting wheat and bringing it back to Greece. That was one of the perspectives from that tale that was turned into a mythology. And like learning things like that was kind of neat, where you get different perspectives of what these things meant. Whether that is or isn't, I don't know, but they're just different perspectives. And I liked hearing that kind of stuff. I was always drawn to the story of Zeus, which I feel like isn't a really not focused on story. Like I know most people have no idea the story of Zeus. You know who Zeus is, his after story, his involvement with Hercules, like all these different things. He's a womanizer, all this stuff about him. Like, but does anyone know, like, where did Zeus come from? What's his story? All that journey. And I really found that story awesome and what that sort of represents. So that's always been my favorite story.
Nice. And did you always want to be an actor, or did you consider doing other things for a little while?
I've been wanting to be an actor since I was about 7 years old. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I love it. Not everyone's so lucky when looking at, clear paths. So that's pretty cool. Did you having, the family history, the background, being Greek, have, and stuff like that. So, did you go into it sort of thinking like, I want to do other stuff, but also I like doing sort of mythological things and this like lends well to your background? Or did you kind of just approach it like, whatever comes, let's just do that?
It was very much a whatever comes. At the same time, I was working on some stories of mythology to, hopefully produce one day. I think sometimes when you put your mind into let's call it the vibration of something similar comes your way. So I was very much in the mindset of Greek myths and stuff and writing and doing that. And then all of a sudden Assassin's Creed kind of lands in your lap and you're like, oh, this is interesting. It's like, this is kind of what I was wanting. This is pretty awesome. So yeah, it's always been an open book. At the same time, whatever kind of comes your way, I've just always been very much connected to that time period. And after, like, I really like period pieces. I really like working in period and that genre a lot, warriors and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I do too. And so now I have to ask a fellow period piece fan, is there a certain time period or two that you particularly like, and even slice that even smaller and say like, okay, I like doing ancient world stuff. Then I'm like, okay, so is there like favorite century there?
I really love like King Arthur time period, whenever that is. It's just like I really do. I like that a lot. Just like the knights lore, everything involved in that. I like ancient Egypt a lot. There's not a lot done in that period, but I like that period a lot. If I was to do a period that I don't think has been done quite yet, I would do the Minoan period. Um, yeah, because it's like this untouched area still cinematically for me.
Ooh.
And it's not been done outside of mythology. Like it's done like Jason the Argonauts or the Minotaur kind of, but it's always been done in a sort of over the top way. I would like to do it in a more authentic way.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. It was interesting because I was talking with someone the other day about just sort of seeing Greece, like mythology and stuff brought to life on the screen, whether that's big screen, small screen, whatever. And I realize it's really interesting because when you do Greek source material, I feel like you can find all the mythology, but not a lot on like just Greek culture, like random normal people, which is different from like the Roman source material. Like you got the HBO Rome, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well, that's all people. Why don't we have something? Why don't we do that with Greece? In your opinion, like, why do you think that is? Is it just like more entertaining to do mythology and people are like, I don't want to just do like regular Greece. It's boring.
good question. I'm always looking at funding and like what do people want to fund. So there is a part of you that's I think correct, and it's like, well, if we're going to do Greece, let's do the spectacle, the mythology, and really make it over the top because we're guaranteed to make money. So there's that element. It's also every program you watch, everything you watch has programming in it. So you're influencing the culture's mindset of something about it when you're making a product or a film. You're introducing a concept, an idea about a place. And the Roman Empire is something that's prevalent, and that story is something that is easy to continue on. Whereas like there's not a lot of information, as you said, like being taught as far as the Greek Empire of that time period, Athens and the Minoan civilization, how they were at war with each other's, and that includes Sparta and such later. But the Minoan civilization was an incredible trading route, incredible empire, and people know very little about it other than the Minotaur story. And what that story means is something totally different than what it actually was. It would be an incredible story to be told, but then you're influencing culture in a different way and showing the minds and opening up new ideas about history and the past, which are not taught about very much. It all depends on who wants to introduce those ideas and who wants to fund it.
Fair answer. I mean, unfortunately, just like academia, everything is about funding.
Yeah.
Although, so you do have your own production company, which I was excited to see and hear about a few years ago, I think,
Yeah.
when I first learned about it. So, tell us a little bit, like, what are the types of projects that you want to see done that you're trying to, produce, or do you not have, strict requirements, let's call them?
I have pretty strict requirements for sure. I've had to take a little bit of a backseat over the last few years because it's been the last few years, and I'm slowly working at bringing back that focus into the production company, which is good. The film we did, the first film, which was a short film, and it did fantastic. It went to festivals, won many awards for a very unique project, and I had a hard time categorizing the film. It's called Art: An Unexpected Vocation. It was a very unique because it's a fictional documentary. So I call it docufiction. Nobody knew how to categorize that because everyone in the film is real except one character, and so the whole story is told around that perspective. But everyone you're witnessing is a real person in the world, and it's not performance or acting. It's a unique kind of storytelling, and I like the message in it because it has multiple meanings, and you can take it how you want. So I call it a gray film. It's not black or white. It's a completely gray film, and it has to leave you interpreting it in a way that I believe has a positive message, but some people believe it doesn't. Some people are offended by it, and I'm great. I want you to find what it means to you. So for me, I like movies that make you question life. and make you question things, because life is a bunch of gray. Even the mythology stories like I've been working on and writing, no matter how black or white they may seem at the beginning, I always want you to be left with an image of gray, because that's life. Life is a
Yeah.
balance between the two polarities, and you have to make those choices up for yourself as the individual. And that to me is what's exciting. So yeah, I would. And so that, Assassin's Creed really opened up the door for me to be able to even start a production company, get it going. And I even made the logo of the production company, which was the bird Icarus. So it was like I took Icarus and made him my production company, because he's the one who gave it wings. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more projects and creation. I have a bunch of scripts that we're want to get into development and funding in the future, and so focusing on that in the upcoming years, I think, is going to be my main focus. I'm on a few projects right now, so it's hard to put my focus in too many places at once. Yeah.
Believe me, I think we definitely understand that issue. Those of us who want to do the things we want, but then we're also like, but I have to do this thing over here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think, oh yeah, no, I think academics will find a lot of parallels in what you're describing and what life feels like for us as well. So, if anything, I'm like, okay, well, academics can learn that as much as we like to think what we do is the most important or hard, it's not. It's just different. Yeah, no, that's great though. I'm looking forward to seeing, whatever future things that you guys produce. I'm sure they'll be great. And I love the idea that you do focus really on gray, because it's so easy, I feel like, to just tell a good story, like a vanilla story where you're like, okay, start, introduce whatever, and then, resolution, and then everyone goes home happy. So I like seeing people take on harder projects. So yeah, I'll definitely want to get all the links I can, and then make sure people can go find all of your stuff and be on the Kaviv for that. So I do want to get to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I've been trying very hard, and I think succeeding in not jumping straight into that, because it could easily devolve into me just talking about the game for the next 4 hours. So before I indulge myself in getting to that, I did want to ask whether you had a favorite historical figure from ancient Greece.
I think Socrates is one of my favorites. Yeah, I have to say, like the Assassin's Creed version of Socrates is quite funny. I love the story of Socrates and what he represents and what he did. I think that to me, he's like a Jesus character, because he stood for a conviction and he was willing to face death without fear for that conviction. And he believed that if I believe this, then I must be willing to die for it. And that's okay. And as hard as that is for all of you, my students and everyone else, hard as that is, I am okay with that. And I'm willing to face death with joy, that I'm willing to drink my life in and die for that cause. And I love his method of debate. I think he did some great things, and I appreciate him so much for that. I mean, as far as other stories of Greece, there's so many. I mean, how can one not love the story of Leonidas facing off an entire army, take his men with him, and that confidence of like, we know we're going to die, and we're proud to do it and willing to face that. And I think that's something, both those stories represent something very much lost in our culture. Very much we live in a culture very, protected and safe. And I think it's made us scared of life. Like William Wallace says, every man dies, but not every man truly lives. I think there's something really valuable in that, especially seeing today in the world, we're all very like, and I'm like, let's confront that demon. Let's confront that death, that fear, that Satan, that devil, whatever you want to call him. Let's confront Hades and look him square in the eyes. Let's confront it and be like, you've got nothing.
For sure.
And I think that's missing in a lot of the stuff I feel like in our world today. And those messages and those people always represent that for me. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, just to pick on you a little further, those are amazing ancient people. They're also very well known people who, if you were to drop their names, I feel like people would at least feel like they know who they are.
Yeah. There's been enough movies and things out there that you can get an idea of. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm like, are there any maybe lesser known or lesser covered people that you particularly like and maybe would like to see, tackled, like the subject of film or a TV show or even a video game, someone who we just like, we should know better, but we don't tell their story enough.
Oh gosh, now you're making me go back to stories. I mean, we can go back to, like I said, the Minoan stuff, because King Minos, I think, has a great tale that needs telling, and nobody knows anything. For a culture of that time to be able to have done what they do, have full agricultural water systems, to have such an advanced way of air conditioning through design of the architecture, to have done what they did in that period that we consider like barbaric time periods, to have such an advanced culture, and to be, yeah, I think there's a whole story there. The fact that people, is that teenagers and kids would have to go through rite of passage rituals with bulls, and like, again, facing off the bull, or some look at the devil, or whatever imagery you want to put that, facing off head to head, and be willing to potentially die in that face off. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that's just awesome. To me, it's very well known, but I know it's not a very well known story or character, and so there's a lot in there for me that I like. And there's probably some female characters that I think have great stories, that are worth telling. And yeah, yeah. I mean, other than that, I really appreciate some of the old plays and the old writers, Sophocles and such. And I think people have made movies on there, but they have great inner meaning and message that could be retold in different ways, in modern ways.
Yeah, no, for sure. I totally agree. I just wrote an article that I hope will be published at sometime this year, maybe, question mark. But I was pretty much using Aeschylus and his Oresteia as my source material to compare to a modern game. So
Oh, cool. Yeah.
yeah, I hope that also helps draw attention to some of the ancient authors. But I will say I love the idea of a Minoan series with Minos. It's interesting because it's also so different from where I was expecting you to go, but I'm not disappointed because I love it. I will just add, because I never fail to try to slip this in. I want someone somewhere in the film industry or gaming industry, some industry, to give us a whole mini series on the three tyrannies of Pisistratus, because that is like golden source material.
Oh, remind me that.
Pisistratus was one of the tyrants of Athens, the early tyrants. And so basically he got kicked out of power twice. And each time he came back, before the third time, which stuck until he died, like he came up with like these wild, crazy things to make the people of Athens try to see him as, I am the anointed one. I'm the right one to lead you as tyrant.
I am
And
the Christ.
right. And it's well, the second time he tries to restore himself, I think, is my favorite, because essentially he tries to sucker the people of Athens into thinking that Athena herself comes down from Olympus to say, this is who I want. So he finds, like, for ancient times when people are all short, he finds apparently this very tall woman and dresses her up as Athena, puts her in a chariot next to him, and then like parades through the streets and up the Acropolis and is like, this is Athena, you should bow down. And she's essentially here saying, I should be tyrant. And they're like, oh, yes, we bow down. Okay, we'll put you in power.
I love it.
Yeah,
Brilliant. He went and found some giants from the old world, brought her in. He's like, got a job for you.
exactly.
Paid some of the oracles behind the scene.
It's bribery and trickery at its best.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, the ancient world, you can't make this shit up. And yet it's like, oh man. So, I'm like, that's better than many modern things I've seen. Let's use that. So I'm definitely hoping someone will do that. And then I've always wanted to see
That's a good story. That's a very good story.
right. I'm like, someone,
Yeah.
please write it, do it. I'm waiting. And then, of course, I've always wanted to see someone take Themistocles and do a mini series on him and like really do one on him.
Give everyone a breakdown of Themistocles, if you can, your perspective. It's worth their time.
I mean, this is one of the most interesting cases ever. I mean, he's a brilliant statesman, politician, warrior, people say, and he really led Athens during the Persian Wars. And he was kind of the reason that the Greeks stayed together and that they won. But what makes this story so fascinating is that eventually, like most politicians in ancient Athens, they eventually get ostracized. So he got voted out to leave for like 10 years. And then once that happened, he made his way to Persia and then spent the rest of his life being like a governor of like in a Persian territory as a guest of the Persian king. So many people don't realize that this big mighty hero who was all rah rah Greece and Athens ends up like dying a rich guest of Persia.
So very Greek of us to like kick out our own like good people. Once they do great, it's like, oh, don't get above your britches, sir. We're gonna bring you right back down or kick you out.
Right, it's insane.
Socrates and like, yeah, I love Greeks, but we have our things.
It's a bit odd, and I'm like, why, like, you have so much going, maybe this is not a good idea,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, so considering history, considering like poor Athens then runs into like the Sicilian expedition and losing, the Peloponnesian War, you're like, someone fucked up along the way, and I don't know why, but cool, great idea. So, great underdone characters from history.
Probably why the Spartans hated the Athenians so much. It's like, fuck, you guys can't get their shit together. But every time they got something good, they ruin it. I can't put them in charge. We cannot put them in charge.
Like, they're probably looking at them honestly like, man, those decadent fucks. They just threw him away like yesterday's trash. And you're like, yeah. I mean, I can't really argue because they did, but also, oh God. Greeks, man.
Thank you. We're done with you.
Oh man. But yeah, so that as a total aside, if someone in Hollywood hears this, please, you have a lot of things you can do now. We've given you a lot of entertaining material, so please take that up.
And you've got a main actor for it already. So here it's like,
exactly. See, I even did the casting work for you. I did your job for you. This is perfect. All they got to do is listen to this, and then boom, they'll have like 10 ideas and a main actor. Excellent.
I can even do the story breakdown and summary. I mean, this is easy.
See?
And we have the historian right here. She can help make sure it's accurate.
See, I'll consult. I would love to consult. Hire me. So it's perfect.
Done, guys. Just bring the funding. Let's get it going.
I love that. See, we're good. We're good. But yeah, so turning a little now to my favorite thing, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I learned at a conference just this past weekend. Did you know that this game is statistically, by and large, and far away, the most studied game in the fields of classics, history, and archaeology ever?
I didn't, but I could totally see it. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. A lot of love for this game. And so we do meet a lot of historical characters, but we are obviously, as it's a game, we introduce new lovable characters, notably, obviously, Cassandra Alexios, whoever you play, whoever's your Demos, whatever. So I want to ask a little bit about what that process was like for you once you got the gig and they were like handing you the keys to the kingdom and being like, here you go.
I'll be very blunt and very forward, and no knock to the company. I get games have their things. I get that it's a challenge to make stuff. I get there's secrecy involved. I get all that stuff. But I do have to say, I wish there was more information when I started. So when I started this game, I was doing rounds and rounds of auditions and callbacks. And then during one of the tests, I was brought in to do a screen test without even knowing I'd booked yet. So I arrived on set and it was full of actors and production and everyone. And we're in the mocap studio. I'm like, and we're shooting. And I was like, whoa. Like, I don't even know what game I'm in. All I created, I was like, okay, I saw this kind of image of a kind of a guy in a sort of hood with sort of spears standing, and he couldn't see his face, couldn't see anything. And it was ancient Greece. All I knew, ancient Greece, and I had this weird image. That's it. That's all I knew. So I put together, it was Assassin's Creed, and I did my homework, thankfully, on my own. But I had no reference point other than like Ezio and a few other characters. I'm like, okay, what can I create? And I was like, okay, well, I don't know. What can I do with this? I got the Greek accent, and then I'll make him, I was like, he looks like a guy hiding. So Greek hiding kind of guy. I was like, let's make him like a Greek Batman. And that's all I had. That's really what I walked in with, apart from the scene. And the scene was the symposium scene where you're meeting all the people in Athens for the first time. That's my first scene I ever shot, was the symposium. And I knew nothing. And I'm meeting Socrates, I'm meeting Aristophanes, I'm meeting all these people in this thing. And I'm like, okay, well, at least I know some of these characters. And I'm walking into this place kind of blind. I literally was walking in blind, like as an actor altogether. So, building the character was kind of like I threw, put a bunch of ideas together, I threw it at a wall. I walked in a room thinking I'm still auditioning or doing a screen test, not shooting. So like, halfway through the morning, I'm like, okay, guys, is this Assassin's Creed? Are we working on? And everyone like went silent and looked at each other like, he said it. How dare? Oh my God. What do we do? See them all converse in a corner and then come back and be like, yes, it is. I'm like, okay. What I have to say would be, I would have loved more time in the beginning to have established certain things voice wise, building the character wise before I even started, because I didn't even have a director for 3-4 months. So I was really flying blind for a while. And Belasanti hadn't even been cast when I started shooting and doing all of the recordings and stuff. So I was like, everything was thrown at me. So it was a very unique experience in that context. Whereas like, it would have been nice to have had like, let's build the character. Let's finesse. Let's get the texture of the quality of voice, where he sits, who this person is. All these different things would have been really nice to do as a team. This is for all production companies in future. Very helpful. Bring your actors in and develop. They're part of the development, and they will be awesome if you let them develop with you. Bring them in the room with the writers and develop with it. Bring out the character qualities and voice stuff and all these things so that everything is exactly, you're on the same page as you're beginning. It's just going to bring value to all of the production, especially something like this massive, where you're bringing people into a world of, you're spending 2 years on the historical data and all these things, but then you're throwing an actor in blind. I'm like, it can behoove you to bring them in and develop with you. And so that's one thing I will say I wish I had. But apart from that, from there, it was just like trying to understand the world, trying to understand where you're at, and developing the character to fill that world in that situation. So once I kind of got who he was as we progressed and started building a backstory that suited me and a backstory that made things make sense, like how did he go from Sparta to, becoming this Mystios, and like, what is those years that happened in between there to make him this type of personality and not have a completely jaded perspective, because although he's a bit bitter about everything, which was Greek, we kept him comedic but bitter. He had a bittersweet element to him. He still had a heart deep down, and that was really important, how to keep that heart maintained, just really well protected, and a rough exterior on top of him. Like, I didn't want to make a stereotypical character. I wanted to make a gruff, really walled dude in ancient Greece who gave two shits, about everything, like whatever, but deep down he still had a childlike heart in there that's being really well protected. And slowly the game opens it up, and it's either crushed at the end or healed, depending on which way you choose. And it's hard when you're making a choose your own adventure game and you want to keep this somewhat cohesive character through line for them. So I don't know if that helps or not, but yeah, that was kind of, development was slow. I built a body movement. I built like a walk, finding the voice, like where he sat, and then how he walked as a warrior. Like, how would someone who's well guarded and protected, how would someone move in that time period? How eloquent are they if they were brought up to a certain age in a higher etiquette, let's say, environment? They're Spartans, are still part of a royal family. They're still part of this, but then to later have to grow up in a rough environment. So you have those two parts to them, and more pirate-like, if you want to put it that way. And so they're right in the lower class. So finding out that area and trying to balance that, it was a lot of fun, actually, to put those pieces together. And I really tried to look for that in him and keep him fun and alive and not just one noted. And as I learned, because it was a first time big character like that for me, that was my big introduction to I'll be straightforward, my lead role in a franchise game like that. So I was learning a lot in that. I'd done lots of games prior to that, but none to that extent. And so what that involved and how subtle to play things or not, like, I wasn't sure. I was learning. So honestly, when the game first came out, I was and reviews and all these things and seeing and watching, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I learned so much so that I could apply it to the DLCs just by my performance alone and seeing what worked and what didn't. And there's lots that goes into that and explanation, but it was a really, really beautiful process that was very painful to experience. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
You're gonna like make me cry over here. Gosh.
They say,
Okay.
you know, it's called School of Hard Knocks, right? You learn the hard way. And that game was one of those experiences for me.
Well, it turned out beautifully. I love both performances. I mean, it's really hard because every time I want to start a new game plus, I then get confronted with, I don't know who I want to play as today. Maybe I'll switch. I don't know. So I feel trapped. I have to have like two simultaneous games going so I can switch back and forth because I'm like, no, but now I want this one and this one. So gosh, yeah. Thanks for making my gaming choices harder. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Anytime. Absolutely. Did that answer your question, by the way? Did that help? I'm like, did you want more detail on anything in there?
I mean, that was perfectly adequate. I mean, it was great. I mean, I can get into more detailed questions, I suppose, just to bounce off of that. But, and just because, I mean, you know, people, especially in academia, we don't really know how these things go. The follow up I did have was, you know, creating the character is one thing. But for us as historians, you know, I think our big thing is, are you given anything particularly historical, like historical marks, where it's like you need to go within the bounds of this is what was historically accurate at the time, and then do you have to sort of adjust the character and performance and other things to that, or is it like, yeah, it's a historical game, just do the character and then we'll make it fit?
I think they did their due diligence on like trying to make the story elements fit to the historical time in some way or another. I know it wasn't accurate because certain characters didn't exist at that exact same moments in history together, but they really did a fun job at trying to include a bunch of historical figures and things that happen all in one cohesive storyline. So I understood that. So it's like we're in a game world. We're trying to bring all this stuff together. And it was more the latter, I would say, of the question. I think it was a little bit more on the latter side. You know, we're in a game world. We're trying to be as historically accurate as possible, yet we're playing into it. Like even behind you, that world you're looking at would be much more colorful in real life. All those banners and all the painting on the, you know, the little Parthenon thing over there, like all of that would be bright neon and super vibrant, but it was too distracting for a video game. So you can't be historically accurate. It's like, but you have to make choices that are going to, you know, you have to serve there's a product that has to be delivered and you're serving that as best you can. And you're also trying to be as authentic as you can. And I appreciate what they did because even looking at the image behind you, like how stunning to put that type of detail into a video game and bring it to life.
I mean, it's the prettiest game I think I've ever played in my life. And like every time I play it, I don't even want to like play. I just want to walk around on my horse and admire everything because it sort of reminds me of being in Greece, which is great, but then bad because I'm like, oh, but then there's like the bear that's going to attack me. And then I'm like, no, run away. And then I'm like, I didn't get enough time to admire the statue or whatever. So yeah, I suppose there's like discovery tour mode where I don't have to worry about things attacking me. But yeah, no, it's gorgeous. And you know, for the most part, yeah, like we get it. It's edutainment. It's not gonna be 100%. And that's fine because it's for
Edutainment.
it's my favorite. It's edutainment. So you can it accounts for an accuracy, obviously. But I guess, you know, out of all the beautiful details that are in the game that they did get right, but also for the things that are notable that aren't, you know, is there anything in game that like particularly stands out that either they got right or that they got wrong that you would have liked to see different?
Dang, that's a good question. As far as architecture and design, as the game goes, and like really making a miniature version of a reality, they got it right. They really did. You run through Athens and you run to like even just like this is Naxos. I'm like, yeah. And then you go to Delphi. And I've been to Delphi. So seeing it when it was in, you know, I'm walking up, I was like, oh, I know these streets. They obviously don't have all the buildings up, but you can see where all the platforms are for all these buildings. And you're like, oh, this is what it looked like. Oh, you know, so like they got it right. Like I teared up when I saw it on the first time. That part I think was immaculate. Like I just think if you did something right, you got the design of this game well. Is there anything they got wrong? I don't have anything specific to point out. Like we really tried to bring in a lot of the Greek quality, so I was glad we did that. Like Melisande and I really discussed, because some things were, I'm sure they didn't intend on, was the emotion of Greeks, whether it be high or low. We're funny and we're bitter and we're like this, and it's like, so we can be very angry and yelly and expressive, which is not an American necessarily way of communicating. Like when we're yelling at each other, people are like, oh my god, they're fighting. They're like, no, that's just a conversation. So it's like in Greece, you go, the experience, like, oh my god, they put a lot of emotion in their conversations, so it looks like they're about to fight each other, and you're like, no, that's just them talking. And so that's a funny part we really tried to include, was a bit of the cultural play of what they're like. And I'm glad we did that. Could there have been more? Probably. But we really tried to make sure that at least some of that was touched upon. And I know a lot of Greek people reached out to me and laugh and enjoy that. So I know we hit it. Wrong. I'm going to think about wrong. I'm not sure what to say at this moment, but yeah. What am I? Sure. It's artistic exploration. So I'm not going to say they did it wrong. They just took leeway on things, and fine, of course, that's what you're going to do. Yeah. Did they make robots like in Jason and the Argonauts with robot owls and blah 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 blah? I'm like, thank God, no.
Oh man. I mean, I guess if you're a historian, you could look at any of the Isu things and be like, that is not Greek. But I'm also like, Assassin's Creed. Right. See, I'm like, that's the brand, so you can't hold that against them. I mean, for the most.
What a great integration, though, like Isu and Atlantis and the whole thing, and like bringing the pantheon into this whole other Atlantean story. Like I was like, oh, this is cool. Oh, you just integrated some conspiratorial historical data, which I do believe has truth to it, into a mythological pantheon of Greeks, and taking the Anunnaki, the stories for the Enuma Elish, taking and bringing them all in one thing. I was like, this is great.
Gosh, these people it's like they're brilliant or something. Like it's like they know what they're doing.
Yeah, like even the Apple element to it all is like, oh, this is, they've done some good meshing of multiple history things into one and trying to make them all cohesive. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have many complaints about it as a historian myself. I will say though that for me, the one thing that bothers me, so I make Archeo gaming videos. So I use the game and I walk around it, and then I sort of go through, what would have been accurate, what might not have been, and I sort of make these to educate general public. And so one of the things I talk about is that when you're running through Athens and you see like the beautiful detail that they put into the Parthenon, and you're like, this is the most famous building. It's still here today. It's great. Although the shields that they put up where like the pediments and the frieze should be, those weren't up until Alexander the Great. So I'm like, wow, this is way too early in history. This is not, I mean, it was accurate at one time, but not now.
Yes, right.
So I was like, okay, that's an interesting choice. And then they put the frieze on the inside of the Parthenon and not on the outside, which was interesting, because I walked in and I was like, oh, this is repeated scenes of the procession of the Panathenaea ritual on the inside. Okay. So it's like small nitpicky art historian things, but like for the most part, it's great. It looks good. You wouldn't know. But the thing that shocked me is that I have a friend who works in the Agora in Athens and has gone there for many summers. And at the time, it was a grad student who did great research in sort of reconstructing and sort of breaking down what something called the Stoa Poikile would have looked like. The painted stoa is a building. And then you walk around it in the game and it's there. It's recreated and it's based off of this, at the time, grad students' real research. And so when we see it, and I showed my friends who are like art history professors, they were like, wait, that's accurate. Like, that's so accurate. It's like painful. I want this in my classroom. So it's interesting how the games strike this line between how you can get something so accurate and then something simple like the Parthenon. I'm like, yes, but.
Right. Yeah. And the Parthenon is like, that's a really big deal, guys. Like, of all the things, you could have hit the Parthenon right.
Right. So I'm like, I don't understand. So I don't know if it was a time or a budget issue because obviously those are factors for games, but I'm just like, come on, the biggest, most famous. Okay. Okay.
No, that was a
Interesting.
choice. That's an interesting choice why they would do that, because I was privy to some of that information, and the Parthenon was done a year and a half before the game even came out. So like I know that. So it's an interesting. It's some reason they made that choice. I don't know why, but it's an interesting choice, and why they would want to include that future history into the past that wasn't accurate. And maybe there was a different historian working on the ceremony processions. I don't know. And they had a different perspective. Who knows? Interesting, though. Very interesting, because that is a
Yeah.
big deal. Those to me are like, especially when you want to do the historical architecture properly, you want to hit those things pretty accurately.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I've talked to Mel McCubry, who I believe you are very familiar with.
Love Mel. She
And
was our
and
head lead
so
writer, and she's brilliant.
yeah, and so she was able to explain, a lot of the smaller temples, like the one at Delphi and stuff. She did explain that it was a time thing, and so they did have to sort of craft one original temple, and then they kind of copied and pasted just for because the game is huge. And so I did understand that for a lot of the other temples that don't have the correct sort of statuary. But yeah, I just remember I'm
Just
like,
the Parthenon. You're like,
just the Parthenon. I'm like, that's the one that it's still here. I'm like, we
don't fuck
can't.
around with this one, guys.
I don't, because I'm just like, we can prove this. And I'm like, we still fight with the UK over the marbles that should have been there. So when I see them on the temple in bronze, I'm like, but they're not because they're in a museum and they're not bronze. So it's just so I love everything except the one thing they did is they did the Parthenon dirty. And that's the only thing that I'm like, stop.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You did him dirty.
Like, gosh, we have that.
It was made by Spartans. That's why you did it.
They came in
They came
at the Isu bidding or something and then ruined it for all of us.
That's fun. Well, good to know. There you go, audience. You know that you should look up the historical accuracy of the Parthenon and not rely on the games version.
I mean, okay, well, that was a whole tangent, but you know what? It was needed. My audience knows I get too protective in ways of this game. So
Hey, I like facts. Good facts are valuable, and
that's
we're not
yes.
knocking the game. We're just we're pointing out details so people are aware. Because again, you want people to be as accurate in their assessments of life as possible.
That is why hopefully they are listening to this because they want real facts about how the game was made and other little tidbits. And also, I'm just a huge Assassin's Creed Odyssey nerd. It's fine. It's not like I, turned on the game yesterday and found that I had cough 1,600 hours cough in the game. Did I just say that? Yes, I did.
Yeah, you did. 60.
Yeah, it's a bit wild.
I'm glad you like it that much, though. I'm honored to be part of such a beautiful game. We can knock it or praise it, whatever it is. I think it was just an incredible thing they made, and I'm so proud and honored to be part of it in my lifetime, that I could be a part of a project like this and create a character like this, because Alexios is always going to be a standout experience in my life. Like, he became very close to my heart. I don't know how else to put it. The characters are fun to play. I love jumping in and playing roles. There is no role in my life that I have probably become more connected to than Alexios, which is neat. It's neat.
I love that.
Spent a lot of years with the character, and eventually, like, you start thinking with them as you're reading your scripts. We would get long, giant scripts. You're 900-page scripts and stuff. You're like, okay. But as you're going, because you're so into their life, you're thinking how they're going to respond.
Yeah.
It's rare as an actor to do it, because a lot of time your actor mind is kicking in and being like, okay, how would this character respond in this moment to do this thing? And like, you're building the moments for them. I was reading scripts and thinking in his responses. That was great. It was so great. That was rare. So that was really, really cool. And when I got to that place, I was having a blast with him.
Oh man. I mean, it just sounds like, the role of a lifetime, an amazing experience. And I am a little curious though. I mean, because obviously roles are separated when you work on a production this big. Were you able to consult with the historian they had on the project, or not really?
No, not really. I mean, sometimes what we do would ask the writer, and the writer would look into certain things. I'd met the historians when I was introduced at Ubisoft and went to the company in Quebec, and I met them. But as far as like on set collaboration, no, yeah, it would have been cool. But it's fine that those are the details that we don't really. We see an image on a screen and we're in a blank room with nothing but our imagination. So in some ways it's good. It would be nice to have like more details as far as the world goes when you're doing stuff. In another way, it's like any world you're in. Whatever world you're in, you're not paying attention the same way you would if you were visiting it. It's your world. You walk into buildings, you do these things. You're not giving a crap about the architecture most of the time when you're you're living your life, unless it's you want to pay attention to it for some reason. And so yeah, you just treat it like the world you're in.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do understand why but it's interesting. I mean, and maybe it's just because I am coming from the historian side, but I feel like it would benefit everyone, especially the actors and performance and just other things, if they could have a direct line to consult with the historical
it'd be great.
consultants.
It would be great. I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be awesome. I would have loved like looking at this imagery behind you to, okay, here's where you are. You're walking up these steps. You're going here. You're doing this thing. And this is what it looks like. It's very rare you get that much detail. It's usually a 3D animated kind of like basic. There would be a building there and a mountain and then the vast range behind you, but you wouldn't get this level of intimacy. So you're like of detail. So you're like looking around. You're like, okay, so I'm in the open air. I'm walking up to this building and there's this much room in the distance. And so that's how you kind of reference your world around you. And then when you're building your scene and you're thinking of all those things, that's kind of how you're seeing it. But if you had this level of detail, you would probably be perceiving things a little differently. Like if I knew those statues were there and I knew this little detail was there, I might make them reference points as I'm walking through those spaces. I would use them to my advantage.
Yeah. Okay, this question is just for me because, well, I can ask. Did you have a preference between playing Alexios or Demos? Because I'm sure they're very different roles, even though it's like same person, but like different. Yeah, did you have a preference?
Some people had different perceptions on how to perform Demos when we were going through it. And I had a very particular preference, which was they're not the same people. They're not Alexios. Demos is younger. Alexios is the older sibling, and Demos is the younger sibling. So they're different people to me. And the way they're going to interact with the world is going to be very different. To me, it was like, there is really no Alexios in Demos, other than we make him Alexios as Demos, So I really wanted to create two different characters outside of their anatomy as being the same person. And Demos is, villains are fun. To get into the mindset of why a villain does something is not easy because it usually comes with a lot of pain and where that pain stems from. Because every character, in my opinion, is trying to get love met in some way or another. Every character is looking for love and they're trying to get that love need met in one way or another, whether it's through power, which, and control. Their way of doing it is going to be theirs uniquely, but that's kind of like, I need that need met. And I'm protecting myself to get that need met, or I'm using this to get my need met. Whereas Alexios was coming from a different place. Alexios is coming from not necessarily wanting power like Demos is and control. Alexios is looking for healing and worthiness, from his parents. He needs to feel accepted, and he feels like he's disappointed the people around him. Where Demos doesn't give a fuck about disappointing people around him. Demos would care less. Demos would actually destroy the whole cult if he could and take it over because everyone's a subordinate. He would rather be at the top of the food chain. And Alexios doesn't care much for the power. Alexios is more of a hurt inner child that's trying to make his way through the world and do the best he can. Even though he's killing people and do all these things, he's still trying to do the best he can under his circumstances. So to me, it's a hard to decide which character I like more. But I really found, if I had to choose like which one I would, I mean, Alexios is my heart, man, because Alexios is more like me. I don't know how to describe it. I'm more like him. Where Demos is like someone who wants to take power and control to protect himself from the world.
Yeah, fair. I mean, it's as simple as that. Two different people, very different motivations. Totally.
Emos are just fun.
Yeah, he's just fun. He's just a
He's
crazy
fun.
guy.
He's a crazy motherfucker. He's fun.
He's just a crazy guy. We're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
you can do whatever.
as far as the performance quality goes, I have to say Demos is a pretty fun role to play.
No, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. So obviously we've been talking about a lot of different stories here today. Now, because it's a choose your own adventure, not everyone's going to get the same ending. But personally for you, do you like the families back together, or do you kind of like the more in line with traditional Greek tragedy where like everyone's dead?
As an actor, the Greek tragedy was the way more the one I like. As a person, obviously I like the happy ending. And as a person, as an actor, the happy ending means that Demos lives, which means we can tell more stories as Alexios and Cassandra down the road. So I'm like, I like that ending because it's the ending everyone wants. I mean, it's to me, and I'm all for healing. So we have a lot Greek tragedies as wonderful as they can be there's very little healing in them. And I believe in living in a world with healing is necessity. And if we continue to live in a world of pain and an eye for an eye and that type of mindset, we're never going to get to salvation in our consciousness of society and each other. So I'm all about, I like the healing and moving forward and how to work together. So I like that personally. As far as an actor goes, the tragedy is a much more exciting way to play. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. I personally can't bring myself to get the Greek tragedy ending as much as I like reading Greek tragedies. I'm like, no, I can't do it. I want the family. I want my family. Gosh. Okay, as a quick aside before I get us to our poem, I did want to mention that one of I think it's just tied in like nostalgia and stuff, but when I was in high school, I like woke up at 1 a.m. and saw Odysseus Voyage to the Underworld was playing on like sci-fi or whatever. And I'm just like watching this random movie and I'm already like, oh, I love ancient Greece and all these things. And then I see this wonderful character named Christos appear on my screen. And I go, he's fun. Also, he's the only one who's right. I was like, everyone else is kind of a dumb fuck, but okay. So I watched it again to cover it on a different podcast that I also co-host. And so we were watching it again. And having seen you then as Alexios and now seeing you all these years later again in this early role, I was like, oh my God, this is hilarious. This must have been so fun. So just quickly, what was that like? Was that super fun? Were you able to be as crazy as that character seemed? Because that's just looked like a riot, even though you were sadly not with them for that long.
Yeah. Okay. So Odysseus, Voyage to the Underworld, I think was one that the Isles of the Mist was the working title, and in different countries. So if you're looking for it, and yeah, I play the character called Christos, and he's a bit of a seer. So he can see things and premonitions, as they're about to happen. And so Odysseus he uses him as kind of team informant. I remember auditioning for that. And the director told me after, he's like, it was between you and this other guy. And I showed it to the hair and makeup team, and they all pointed to you for your audition. And so I cast you. I was like, okay. Because I went over the top. I just went big. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I just gave it. I was like, I need to be in this film. I need to be. And he was written as he was the smallest, probably named character in the script. And it was one of those roles that was like, no role is small, no role is little, no role is too small. So all I really tried to do was invest in his experience as deeply as I could at that time and make it, yeah, it's written there, it's on paper, it's just very little, but how can I make those things mean a lot? And I hope I did a good job, but I think I invested a lot into that character. I hurt myself so hard in that role. I was running a lot, like there's scenes where I'm being chased and, I busted my ankle. There's a scene where I'm walking and looking at a cave and then you see me slide down the mountain. Well, that was all improv. So the director basically wanted me to walk up to the ridge, look that way, and then walk up the ridge further and out of frame. And I'm like, okay, so we're shooting, there's trains going by and sound, I can't hear anything. And basically, I'm walking on the ridge, I'm looking at the cave, and in my mind, I'm like, why would I go that way? Like, I don't understand why I would go that way. And I just like instinctively just said, like, I'm going towards the cave. That's where I want to go. So I started walking forward. I just went down the face of the rock face. If you guys watch it, I'm in sandals and a skirt, and like I'm sliding down this rock face, and then I can see the director when I get to the bottom, and he's like just freaking out. He's like, and I can see him go like this way, so I don't leave frame as I'm running. So you'll see me darting and then coming this way, and then I just jump to the ground, and I'm looking and like slowly and I could just see him like trying to direct me without saying anything in the backdrop, and I finished. He's like, you're nuts, and I don't know. I committed to that role 10,000%, and I loved it. And working with what's his name? My apologies to the actor who played the mummy, but we did that scene where I'm warning everybody before I leave them, and it was a really big moment for me. And when I finished that scene, and he was like, "That was very good." And I was young at the time, I was still early days for me acting. Just to get that validation from a big actor like that was really something for me, and I was very grateful. He to just be like, that was very good. And I was like, thank you. I didn't know how it was because I'm emoting all over the place. So it's like, I have no idea. I'm just committing and like I'm going for it. To me, it was, what can you do with a small role and how can you make him mean something? And to me, it ended up being a bigger character than was intended on the script. And the director at the end of shooting said, at the end, he said, I want you to know that the other actors, for a role that it was the role that everybody wanted in the end. And I was like, oh, cool. And it meant like, you did something with it. And I was like, that was cool. Not to knock any of the other performances or actors. I love them all. They're great people. But yeah, I really tried to bring that world, and I was the only Greek in it, and like trying to bring that kind of thing to life for such a, people can take it, whatever. It's a TV movie, it's this and that. And like, I treated it like I was in fucking Troy with a Ridley Scott movie, and I was just doing my best at the time. Yeah.
Well, job well done. It was super apparent that you had a lot of enthusiasm because it bleeds off the screen. And I definitely remember just thinking, the random dude who pops out of the bushes wearing a literal necklace of bones is my favorite.
Oh, it just reminded me, like, so there's a scene where I get picked up by the creature flying in the air, right? So I had a stunt guy, and I was like, no, I'll do it. So that's me, like, getting in the riverbed, running, and getting picked up through the air in like a harness or whatever, and shot through the thing. And then after the creature's attacking me on the ground, and I'm doing all of it, and they're shooting blood on me and like all this stuff, and I'm fighting, and eventually they dug my body in the ground and like had pools of blood like soaking through the ground, and it was like freezing cold. But I just remember fighting this imaginary demon on the ground, like just going for it. I don't know why I'm saying it, but it was just one of those surreal experiences of an actor just playing with nothing and except the commitment in your mind. It looks great. I love like seeing it in this stuff, but yeah, it was a fun project. So long tangent about it, but I don't get to share that story often, so it's kind of a first time.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Great. Well, if you want that story, come to this podcast because we have the cool stuff. It stands out as one of those, movies I saw, and it stuck with me because that was when I was like a baby historian. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, this is great. So, and then, who doesn't love a crazy dude with a necklace of bones and kind of visions? Yeah, fantastic. Role, fantastic job. It sounds like it was really fun. So just wanted to, have you mention that briefly. But so sadly, I could stay here talking for like 4 or 5 other hours, but I don't think that either of us have time for that, sadly.
I know I have children. I mean, I better get back to being a father.
Oh, the things we must do.
The things we do.
But at the end of each podcast episode, I ask if every guest will read Shelley's Ozymandias poem, and I was hoping that you would read it as Alexios.
Oh, okay. Shelley's Ozymandias. Alexios. It's fun when I haven't done Alexios for a while, so bringing him out again is like a good. All right, where is he? There he is. Okay, bring him back. Every character I ever had, I always try to find a word that brings like him out again. Swordfish. I met the traveler from an antique land. who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." Couple little spots I would redo, but that was good.
I was like, I'm getting so excited because Alexios just read me my favorite poem of all time. So I don't think there's nowhere further up I can go. It's all down from here.
Chiere.
Oh.
That's a good one. I like this. This is nice. I should do more poems in Alexios's voice. There's one thing I really want to do before we go, and I'm going to see if I can do it, but I want to do, I've recorded it, but now I want to do like a real live action green screen version of it, of Once More Into the Breach, but as Alexios and in Sparta.
Yes.
Yeah. So good. It's so I've rewritten it into Sparta, so it's really good.
Oh,
But,
amazing.
Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more. Or close the wall up with our Spartan dead. It's so good. It works so perfect. Like, I rewrote it all, so it fits right into that time, and it's like, yeah.
I
So
love
I'll let
it.
you know. I'll let you know when it's done.
Oh, please, please, please. We're gonna have to get you back just so you can do a reading as Alexios, I think. This is it. This is what is happening. Yeah, okay, so this is favorite poem, and I love it because of its political themes, of its life themes, and just for our listeners, because all guests do this, what are just like the first things this poem makes you think about?
That's a good question. I mean, to me, it's still fresh in my mind, so I'm putting the subtext together is new. Honestly, I would need to go deeper into him to understand what it means. Honestly, I don't want to be like, oh, this is what it means. There seems to be a lot of subtext to this.
There's so much subtext. I mean, people could write essays on the subtext and it's 14 lines, which is what's impressive. It's a 14-line sonnet, and people are like, I could write a treatise on this. But obviously, it does take time, and analyzing poetry is hard. I always hated it in school because it was so hard. And I was like, I need like a week on this, not 1 minute in a class.
Oh, hold on. Okay, so I see a pillar of life.
There you go.
It's about a traveler who goes through life, becoming a king of their own journey in the life of the land of sand, which is a pillar of death. Very quickly, that's what I'm assessing off just the words. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I got right away. I was like, okay, there we go. I could go further if you want me to in a different.
Here, I figured for those who are not as familiar with this poem, I usually provide some kind of background or historical context, as one who is a historian does. This is actually written by Percy Shelley in 1818. It's about a statue of Ramesses the Second, so Ramesses the Great, and they had uncovered a statue in Egypt buried, and the statue was broken, and it was being transported to the British Museum to be held there. And so he got very poetic and decided he would write poetry about it. And so, when I look at it and when I sort of analyze it, it does stand out. And one of the things is sort of the ephemeral nature of power. This great pharaoh who said that my civilization will be around for, eternity. And then you're like, but it didn't. And it's buried in sand. It's gone. And even the statue of your greatness that we're supposed to be seeing was buried in sand. And so, people helped build the thing. People had to uncover the thing who were not great pharaohs. And so it can be quite political, but it can also just be a testament of like time and life and history. And so those are kind of the main immediate themes that I like to bring up to people, because it leads perfectly into sort of the last question that I ask every guest on the show. And that's, if you think about this poem in this sort of way of, the like themes of monumentality and history and what will remain, what does remain. If you think about our culture right now, do we have like a modern type of Ozymandias thing, like something we think is so amazing right now and it's going to be all the rage forever, but then like future humans 500 years from now, are they going to look back and be like, we agree, or like, y'all are crazy?
Probably our technology. We think it's going to be the thing forever, but I don't know.
Yeah.
All it takes is one cataclysm. Gone.
Yeah.
And with that, all our knowledge.
Yeah,
because
that's true.
It's not etched in stone and in a pillar of life.
Exactly.
So as crazy as he might have been, is he wrong? His testament has lasted through the thousands of years. Whether it continued the way he expected, it did continue because he carved his life in stone.
That's true. I mean, it may have crumbled, but it's still there.
It's still there. You're still talking about it.
Exactly. So, was this man crazy? Was he a genius? We don't know. But that's the thing I love about this poem, that it makes us think.
The thing I like about the Great Pyramid. It makes you think.
It's still there.
Yeah.
So
with endless questions.
I know, and we still can't answer them.
None. We can't even figure out how to move like the 30-ton blocks they did. I'm like, people making up all this stuff. I'm like, you don't know.
I know, right? It's insane. Oh man. Okay, I did kind of lie. There's one more question, but this is really, really easy. That's just tell people where they can find you to find all the cool things that you are working on.
Okay, so I've been a lacking promotionist, but where you can find me is the easiest place is Instagram at, I believe it's Michael Antonakos on Instagram. And that's the place you find me the most, is Instagram. I will do better. To all my fans, I love you all, and I'm so grateful. I'm not a big person for pushing myself on things, so I will do better. But that's it. Instagram's my favorite place to find me. And then I do have a website that I'm revamping right now, so it's down, but it's just my name, michaelantonakos.com. I'm also on Twitter once in a while, but very rarely. So those are two blessed places. And then I will be updating my production company soon as well for icarosfilms.com. And you can follow me on Instagram for there as well. Yeah, that will be in the future, just to keep you abreast. But if you follow, there'll be stuff to come. And thank you all.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me. This has been so fun. And we definitely have to have you and Alexios, I guess, come back.
Wonderful.
Trireme Transit is now departing ancient office hours. Next stop is Present Ponderings.